Hello, I'm Katy Gordon, a cardiovascular healthcare expert. I'm going to be running a series of tips and facts that hopefully you will find interesting to help you with your lifestyle choices and leading a healthier life. This morning, I thought I would talk to you about salt. It's very, very key in managing blood pressure. And I've, over the years, worked with many patients who've had high blood pressures and have also taken in a lot of salt, mainly in their food. So I thought I'd start off with salt as this first introduction. Salt, as we all know, has been involved in preserving food for quite some centuries, but the links with high blood pressure have really only been made since the 1960s. And we don't know exactly what the link is, but there is a definite link. And as a result, it would be really good if we all took a lot more thought about what we do with salt in the way we prepare food and if we add it to our food at the table. I'd like to illustrate this with a point of somebody I came across years ago who was a woman in her early 30s, and she came to see a very good friend of mine who was a hypertension specialist nurse, so she looked after people with high blood pressure. And this woman came to see her, and she got intractably high blood pressure and no obvious reason for it. And a friend of mine went through the usual questions about, does she add salt to her food? And what exercise does she take? Does she smoke? Which can all affect blood pressure, but salt being the biggest factor in raising blood pressure. And this woman said no, she didn't really add salt to her food. So she was on maximum therapy, on high doses of several different drugs, and she came in to see my friend every week whilst they tried to work out what it was that they needed to do, or she needed to do, together to actually sort out her high blood pressure. And then one day she came in for a routine appointment, and she'd seen a documentary the night before about food and salt and her health and health in general. And she said to my friend, you asked me about adding salt to my food, and I said I don't really do that. And now I've been working with you, I don't add it at all. But I do add salt to my coffee. Would that have the same effect? Well, my friend really fell over backwards, because obviously adding any salt to anything is going to have an effect. So she asked this woman, how much salt she added and how many cups of coffee she had. And she adds a teaspoon of salt to every cup of coffee she drinks. It's what her grandmother taught her. She was born and brought up in the tropics, her grandmother, and she always taught her granddaughter that you needed to replace the salt that you would lose through sweat, which in a hot country, you're obviously going to sweat more. So this friend of mine was working through all of this, and then discovered that she drinks between 6 and 8 cups of coffee a day. That is an awful lot of salt. Not least to say, most of us would find that completely disgusting to drink. Anyway, my friend worked with this person over the next few weeks, and within a matter of weeks her blood pressure was down to normal. She was on minimum drug therapy. She needed to stay on it because she'd been having this high salt intake for so long. And it had damaged her kidneys a little bit, so that needed to just be kept an eye on. However, she's leading a normal and healthy life and doesn't need dialysis or anything, but they do just keep an eye on that. But the message that then came over to my friend was, I need to be very careful, think very carefully how I ask questions of people. So my question to you is, how much salt do you add? I presume probably not to cups of coffee, but what do you add to the food that arrives on the table in front of you? Do you add it before eating it and tasting it, or do you not add it? Little tips that will help is add a little bit of salt to water if you're cooking vegetables or boiling vegetables, but don't add it actually to the food when it comes to the table. You only need a very little bit. Interestingly enough, with this woman and having a teaspoon of salt in every cup of coffee, the recommended maximum daily allowance is 1 teaspoon of salt, and that's maximum recommended daily allowance. So she was well over the top on that. So you might like to think very carefully about how much you add to your food, and do you add it in cooking, because it's always good to try and cut it down if you can. If you eat processed foods or ready meals from supermarkets, there's a lot of hidden salt as well as sugar in those, so it's also well worth looking at what comes in that. I would like to close now and say that if you have any questions, please post them on my website, via my blog, which is www.katygordon.com. and I will respond to you either through video blogs like this or actually written blogs on my website. But do please get in touch. I would love to hear from you. Many thanks.